If you're thinking about starting a recomposition journey, this is going to be a really helpful video for you to watch, because before you jump in, I want to make sure that you're not making some of these mistakes. These are definitely the most common things that I will see inside coaching. After the 4 years of doing this, hundreds of women taken through their own recomp journeys, these are without question the 5 things that pop up the most often. If you can avoid these from day one, your journey is going to be a hell of a lot easier and more effective. Mistake 1, and this is going to sound odd to start with, but I want you to stay with me. Clean eating. And when I talk about clean eating, I am obviously not saying that you don't need to think about the health contents and the nourishment within your food. Quite literally the opposite. I think the problem with clean eating and really hyperfixating on only eating quote unquote clean foods, what that can essentially do over time is not only create a dicey relationship with food, honestly, and leads you to living a life that isn't particularly well balanced. You find that you can't enjoy social occasions without crippling guilt. You find that you need to bank calories earlier in the day because you're going out for a meal in the evening, kind of restrictive tendencies and negative headspace around particular food groups. That aside, essentially what you're doing when you're only eating clean foods is 9 times out of 10, your actual calorie intake is pretty low. You're eating minced cauliflower and pretending it's rice. You're spiraling courgette and pretending it's pasta. You're not eating butter on your toast. You're always using fry light spray instead of olive oil. All of these things can essentially mean that your diet is not only likely lacking in certain areas that are really important for health and wellness in general, particularly fats and carbs, but also that overall calorie intake is low. Okay. Now, at a certain point, if you're doing that for long enough, if calories remain at this low level, you might have lost some body weight over that period of time. In fact, often you do lose body weight because there's a deficit present, right? But over time, you'll find that you stop losing weight at that level. What you're doing, what you've always done, what has worked in the past stops working. And that's because your body is incredibly clever. When it senses that resources are scarce consistently, it starts to understand that actually it needs to do some things differently in order to literally keep you alive. So it will stop doing some of those things that are non-essential. It will kind of look around and go, okay, well, I need to keep the organs going. That's non-negotiable. But do I really need a menstrual cycle? No, maybe I don't. Do I really need to be talking with my hands quite so much? Do I need to be standing up right now, or could I be sitting down? Do I need to be fidgeting? All of these things that you honestly have no control over, your body will start to downregulate and shut off some of those non-essential functions. So all of a sudden, you're eating 1,300 calories, your weight is maintaining, and you're thinking, my God, my metabolism is wrecked. Or maybe I've just, maybe I was born this way. Maybe I've always had like a slow metabolism. The truth is, after a long period of underfueling, that metabolism that you have right now is not something you were born with. It's something that you have inadvertently built. Now, the bad news for recomp comes in because how on earth are you going to provide the stimulus that you need for muscle growth, which is always part of a recomposition journey, if your body is already pretty reluctant to even do the most basic of functions? Building muscle is incredibly metabolically expensive. It is not going to free up the limited resources that it has to build muscle tissue if we are chronically under fueled. So we do really want to avoid the trap of just eating cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, which often means less and less and less. And really aim to get a good balance of protein, carbs, and fats within your diet. You want to be eating at least at maintenance calories when we're thinking about the muscle growth side of the equation. And if your current maintenance calories are, say, 500 less than we expect them to be using a calorie calculator, then you've got some work to do to upregulate that before you're in a position where muscle growth is going to come much easier. Mistake 2 is 0 rest days, under recovering, and generally just not sleeping and resting very much. So again, this is something I see a lot, particularly with women who are very health focused, who have, big parts of their life dedicated to fitness. They love to lift, they love to run, they love to go to Pilates, they love their HIIT class at the weekend. All of these things may well be things that they truly enjoy, but there is only so much that you can do and recover from. Now, this is incredibly individual. It really does depend on the person as to what their current capacity really is. But again, when we're thinking about muscle growth, I'm not saying you can't run or you can't do your spin class or whatever, but you do need to make sure that your training is reflective of your priority. So if you're strength training currently 4 times a week, and then on the other 3, you're running or swimming or cycling or whatever it may be, when exactly are you giving yourself time for the adaptation to actually occur? Because it doesn't occur in the gym. It occurs at rest. It occurs whilst you sleep. Rest days are rest days for a reason. They are not active recovery days. When you start applying the right amount of rest to your current routine, you will notice an enormous difference when it comes to your actual ability to perform in the gym. And then not only that, but how well we actually adapt afterwards, which is where that muscle growth piece really happens. Getting a decent night's sleep, as many nights as you possibly can do, and taking clear rest days every single week are not things that are working at odds with your training performance. They are part of the plan. And if you're currently completely ignoring them, thinking more, more when it comes to exercise has got to be better, you really are selling yourself short. Mistake 3 is kind of one that ties into the last one: exercising rather than training. So, muscle growth is the goal. It has to be at least part of the goal when it comes to recomping. So, trying to do 7 different things at once is probably not serving you very well when it comes to that goal being a priority. So, we do want to make sure whatever exercise split we are adhering to, we have a relevant level of strength training in there to allow for that to be the priority. Now, when it comes to strength training, you can definitely still be doing strength training in a way that is more exercising than proper structured progressive training. So when we think about a workout class where they're using weights, right? So there is resistance. You are technically resistance training. But the problem with things like that is that oftentimes there's no rest between each of those exercises. There's often not really much opportunity to progressively overload. So exercising tends to look a little bit like moving your body in a way that makes you maybe hot and sweaty, moving in a way that really increases your heart rate. Maybe you're doing slightly different things every week because you like that feeling of soreness because it tells you kind of did something, the hard work was worth it. Now, none of that stuff is bad. That is obviously good for your health. But when we're thinking about recomp, we actually want none of those things. We want proper, structured, progressive strength training with decent periods of rest between each and every set that you do. We want the same movements week in, week out, over many, many weeks and months, getting slightly better every time. We want to be training with real intention. We're not just going through the motions or, doing as many bicep curls as you can in 30 seconds. Every rep counts. So training is really doing something specific and on purpose in a way that you can measure over time. You can see you are improving over time. And in general, you want enough volume per muscle group per week, which tends to be somewhere north of 10, south of 30. It really depends on the muscle groups you're wanting to prioritize. Performed with good technique and within close proximity to failure. So around 1 to 3 reps shy of failure is where we see the most return on investment when it comes to muscle growth. Mistake 4 is chasing fat loss and muscle growth at the same time, all the time. So there may well be a place in your recomp journey for simultaneous fat loss and muscle growth. So there are lots and lots of people who this is relatively easy for. People that are relatively new to strength training or returning from an extended break. Okay, so think about injuries or coming back postpartum. Fantastic candidates for that. People in a bigger body right now with more body fat to lose, they are much more capable of losing fat whilst building muscle. People taking performance enhancing drugs for obvious reasons. And then also, honestly, people who just have yet to optimize their training. This is kind of a fourth category that I feel like I've just made up. This is not a scientific response here. This is just anecdotal based on my experience. But there are lots and lots of people who come in to coaching who say, I've been training for a couple of years, great. But then when we look at kind of how things have been done previously, how many exercises they've been doing, how strong they've got in those couple of years, we can see that there are some real gaps in either training IQ generally or just ability to train with real intensity and train with the right kind of technique. So if we haven't dialed that piece in yet, if you're someone who's been kind of lifting weights ad hoc for a little while and you're thinking, well, I'm not in any of those other groups, I'm not new to lifting, I'm not in a bigger body, I'm not on performance enhancing drugs, there actually is really strong case for you to be able to kind of recomp simultaneously. Now, when it comes to recomping simultaneously, is it possible? Yes, potentially. For a lot of people, though, that is going to be a very, very long and drawn out process where you're not really optimizing either fat loss or muscle gain. So, for the overwhelming majority of people who come through the doors in coaching, the best option is to focus on either of those goals as separate pursuits. So it might be that you start off with a deficit phase to kind of get to a body fat level that you're comfortable with before looking at building. It might be the other way around. Perhaps you're more skinny fat, which essentially means body fat levels are relatively low, but you're under muscled. So there's no tone. So we would look at that building phase first. At maintenance, there's no real need for a surplus for most people before then looking at dieting to reveal what it is that we have built. So looking at those two separate elements as individual pursuits is something that I would strongly suggest for most people. And mistake number 5 is simply tracking the wrong things when it comes to progress, or thinking that progress should look a little bit like a fat loss phase, which is super gratifying. You see progress week on week, you're seeing the scale go down, you're seeing your progress pictures change. Recomping, particularly when we're thinking about maintenance phases at recomp, is so slow. It is not instantly gratifying. It does require real patience and it requires you to realign your expectations. Someone asked me the other day about how long a recomp phase takes. Now, this is so individual, but I genuinely think you're looking north of 6 months for any one person to really make a significant change to your body composition. The reason for that is the time it takes to build muscle mass. That is the main driver as to why this process fundamentally takes a long time. So arguably, we don't really want to be looking at the scales all that much at all. We may well hop on every now and again to just sense check, okay, where are things? Am I in my kind of standard range of fluctuation? Is this what I would expect at maintenance? But really, the main measures of progress are going to come from the physical, what you can actually see with your eyeballs. So, have I got kind of new lines or definition appearing on my body month to month? Probably not week to week, let's be honest. Can I see in key areas that I'm wanting to build? I've got a load of glute volume in my program right now. All of my nutrition is set up for muscle growth. Am I seeing over time that that measurement is increasing? Can I see that my lifts are improving in the gym? Again, probably not week to week. Whether you had a good or terrible night's sleep is a much stronger factor as to how well you do in any one session. What you really want to do is zoom out and look at that logbook. Over time, over the last 3, 4, 5 months, have I been getting noticeably stronger? If the answer to that is yes, then there is no doubt whatsoever that muscle is being built. So use the right metrics of progress here and adjust your expectations accordingly. Body recomposition, in my opinion, is the most powerful way for women and men to change their physique. It is not about constantly dieting. It is not about eating as little as you possibly can. In fact, it's about eating as much as you possibly can, whilst keeping the body fat side of the equation in a place that is comfortable and healthy for you. It is about getting as strong as you could possibly imagine. It is about really embracing food freedom, allowing you to have flexibility, allowing your metabolism to handle more when it comes to the flexibility of life, more calories, more balance. Recomping really does work, but it needs strategy. You need to know what phases you are entering to get you from point A to point B. What do those look like? What does my progress look like in any one of those phases? Recomping is absolutely not just eating as little as you can possibly get away with, training 6 days a week, and hoping for the best. As always, questions in the comments. If you want to add your name to the waitlist for coaching, you can do so in the description, and I'll see you next time. Love you. Bye.